You're listening to the REITE Club podcast, where the focus is all about helping you grow your real estate investment portfolio and live the life you want to live. Come grow with us and join our community at thereiteclub.com. And now your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.
All right. So I am an IT manager by profession, and I still am. About a year ago, actually exactly a year ago, September 29, 2020, is when I started my first investment. And I always had this idea of investing in real estate, just didn't know how to do it. I thought I figured it out. Well, at least I saw other people doing it around that time, and I decided to jump in right away. So I started with a couple of buy and holds, and then I realized, now what do I do? Well, that was a traditional mortgage, the traditional 20% mortgage, and I, bought a couple of buy and holds, and then I don't have, any more money to put in as down payment. So I decided to do a pivot on my strategy, and then I jumped right into some flippings, so some active investments there. So I started in January 2021. I did my first flip in January 2021. And since then I did 6 flips, and all of them remote. So I live in Oakville, Ontario, and those who know this area knows like it's a pretty expensive location to do a flip for, especially for a beginner. So all of these are remote flips, and that's something exciting that I wanted to talk to you guys too here, because I have seen a lot of investors, new investors especially, struggling with this exact reason, like, hey, I can't find anything near me. Like, how do I, but I don't have the courage to do remote investing. So how do I do this? So that's something that I would like to talk about. So yeah, all of my flips are remote. Really, I haven't really visited any of these properties except the last one, which is in Kitchener. That's the closest to me. So a few flips there. We just purchased one property to Burr, and we have something in Alberta for infill. It's a new development, and an Airbnb arbitrage, and recently getting into a bigger flip, which is an acreage flip in Alberta. So that's where I stand right now. Bigger things in the pipeline, but this is where I am right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because that always comes up, right? The remote investing, and I know, Francois, you've invested remotely, and in some ways I have too. If you consider Northern Ontario, even Eastern Canada, with some rent to own, it's a little bit different when you're investing that. But doing flips from a remote area, that's incredible, because I did some renovations on a project. Luckily, it was like a 3-minute walk, and I was there almost every day. I didn't do anything, but I just walked to make sure that it was clean and stuff like that. And with your background as an IT manager, how does, to me, it almost seems like conflicting, the hands-on and the hands-off, or how did you manage that? How did you, get past that barrier to do that remotely? And what skills, would you recommend that someone either get better at or hire out when you're doing things like that remotely?
Number one, the skills, I guess. I mean, I'll jump directly into it, right? Number one, managing a project. And number two, trust people and processes, right? So one thing that worked for me is I'm part of a few networking groups, and some of them like very closely, like the council from Cashflow Tribe, and the Melendave group, and so on. So I'm very close. I'm in a very close-knit groups there, and I do have several allies, and I do network. Like, I do pick up the phone pretty much every day, talk to someone new every day, pretty much. So I do network, and I have developed, there's some allies during this process, and there are a few individuals that I know that I can really trust working with, and I don't really need to micromanage. I'm okay with letting it go. I really don't need to control everything, as long as I know at a higher level, I know the numbers work, I know this is what's needed for renovation, plus 10% maybe. I know this is the ARV. So as long as I trust the person who I work with to find out the ARV, I trust the person who I work with to find the renovation and to execute the renovation, I'm okay with that. So I'm lucky to be able to find such individuals in certain cities. And that's where I went for flips, to those cities: Moncton, New Brunswick, Sault Ste. Mary, Ontario, Pembroke, which is near you, Francois, I guess, right?
Yes.
Pembroke and Petawawa in Ontario. And the closest is Kitchener here. I also have a couple of flips in Alberta, and which is a slightly different story because now I do have a team in Alberta. So that's slightly different. But the other cities, yeah, I was really trying it out, and came out without much damage, I guess.
That's quite a variety of markets. And earlier on, you mentioned something else that's interesting, and that I know kind of where it comes from, but the Airbnb arbitrage, it's something we don't hear too much on the REITE Club, but I have heard it in many other networks. So does that tie in with the flips? Like, do you, well, how do you get into that? Same market or totally different?
Yeah, and if we could take it a step back, explain that, because I've obviously heard of Airbnb, but the arbitrage, maybe, yeah, explaining and how to do that, because I've never heard of that.
Yeah, can you give me 1 second? Sorry. Oh. Okay, so Airbnb arbitrage, again, I was involved with some networking groups out of Alberta, and I was talking to them, and I got this idea, like, if we can lease a unit and then do an Airbnb on it, why not? I mean, again, I didn't know whether it would work, but I just wanted to give it a try. And that's exactly what I did. I gave it a try. So there was a management company in Alberta who would manage it as for us. This is supposed to be like completely hands off. And so they would manage, they would find the unit. All that I needed to do was to sign the lease and pay the rent every month and pay the management fee, and they would manage everything. So yeah, that's exactly what it was. Having said that, during I guess because of the pandemic or whatnot, it didn't exactly work out the way I wanted it to. Again, there is not much of a damage for me, but it was not, to tell you the truth, it was not a huge success. So that's why I didn't go for the second, third one, or the fourth ones. So I just had one, and I'm still running it.
So if you could do something differently, or if you would have changed something in that process, what maybe would you apply now if you were to do that again? Obviously, nobody could have predicted, the COVID pandemic, but what would you have done differently, or advice that you'd give to someone that would, or the next time that you make an investment like that?
Yeah, I would suggest them to do your own due diligence. Do not rely on, someone else's due diligence on this. Do your own, and then identify, know your target market. There are tools out there called like AirDNA, for example, where you could do your own research on a specific market during specific times and so on. So do that, and if you think that the numbers work very well for you, and then jump into it. And also make sure the target city is, again, so during pandemic, the tourist cities really got hurt. So keep those things in mind. Probably do that in a bigger city than trying to do it in a very touristy city. And so do your own due diligence and find the right property management company. It's a very hands-on business. If we have to do it ourselves, it's a very hands-on business. So ideally, you should give it to a management company to do it, but do your own research.
That's what I was going to say. My Airbnb, it's very much like a baby, Alfonso. You'll know all about it very soon. So you need to keep an eye on it, water it, and really keep a close eye on housekeeping and supplies. And like there's a patio door that fell off, like you never know what's going to happen. And you need to keep your clientele, they're much more demanding. So that's a very interesting insight, like you said. So the market where you went was very much tourism, but I found during the pandemic, the biggest clients were actually workers. So nurses, people isolating, a very different clientele we've never seen before. So like you said, no one could have predicted that.
Thanks for listening to the REITE Club podcast and joining our community of real estate investors online at thereiteclub.com, where the focus is about helping you grow. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks from your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.